Hi, good morning. This is Carlos Caloy Conde again for another episode of Open Talk, my podcast on everything that's going on in the Philippines, from politics, social justice, human rights, social issues, name it. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about corruption in this country, how pervasive it is, and why it's so difficult to vanquish it. I'm going to be talking to an expert on good governance, somebody who's been advocating for government reforms and also has been fighting corruption in government. I'm talking about Vince Lazatin, former executive director of Transparency and AccountabilityNetwork, and also of Bantay Kita. He's an acknowledged expert on good governance in the country. Good morning, Vince, and thank you for being here this morning.
Good morning, Kalei. Good to be with you.
Yeah. So let me start off the conversation, Vince, by asking you what's your take on what's happening with with the Disgayas of Pasig City, this whole brouhaha brought up by Mayor Vico Soto about interview with Julius Babaw, and then related to that, ito nga yung DPWH flood control controversy. What's your take on all of this? What's your insight?
Well, I think as regards to the Discaya interview, it's kind of disgusting to see someone so openly flaunt their wealth, especially in a country like ours. And I think it is a bit. I don't think the Discayas are unique
Mm-hmm.
in that kind of wealth, in that kind of what we might consider questionable wealth. And such ostentatious display of it. I mean, that's quite disturbing, I think, Kalai.
Well, you use the word ostentation, and it just reminds me and brings me back to all these issues before under the president's father during the dictatorship, where of course we had Imelda, displaying. I mean, not just Imelda, obviously, but a lot of their cronies
Yeah.
displaying their wealth ostentatiously. At one point,
Yes.
when they were driven out of the country in 1987, it was established that they stole a lot of money, billions and billions. So this is nothing new, really. But really, what's on top of people's mind right now is that why is this still happening? I mean, decades and decades after the Marcoses, after all of that, we are still in the same. We are still faced with the same problems. Why do you think corruption is so tenacious, so hard to defeat?
Yeah, that's a large question to answer. But if I were to sort of, I mean, distill it, I think there is a lack of political will on
Mm-hmm.
the part of those who are in charge of really going after corruption. And we talk about, of course, the government plays a large part in this, whether it's the executive branch or the judicial system, as well as the legislature. We know that, for example, the legislature is dominated by political clans and political families, which have deep business interests. And if I remember correctly, if the number is correct, I think 70 or more percent of our Congress, for example, is comprised of individuals who are part of political clans. And these political clans are most of them, if not all of them, are clinging on to power because they have personal and business interests to protect. And as long as the Congress and the legislature is dominated by these types of individuals, uh, corruption will be a very difficult problem to tackle in that kind of situation.
Well, politics has become. I mean, corruption has become big business, and obviously, right? And there have been efforts, though, to try to at least to moderate the greed, as they say, or to temper the corruption. I mean, even in Congress, where
Yeah.
you pointed out, a majority of those people in Congress belong to political dynasties. These are the same dynasties that have been entrenched for a long, long time and are engaged or are accused or alleged to have been involved also in really massive corruption. But there have been
Yeah.
efforts in Congress, in the executive department, to try to mitigate this. But as you pointed out, masyadong malalim yung roots
Yeah.
ng problema. So is this I think the manifestation here among the public of just how difficult it is parang tinanggap na, normalized na yung ganito. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. To a certain extent, the public has sort of accepted this as something somewhat normal. It's just when you see the case of some of these politicians that just have huge amounts of wealth that sort of people sit up in their chairs and take note. But when you talk about what we might call middle level corruption, people kind of just turn a blind eye to it and accept it as normal. I mean, if I've had conversations with friends talking about, for example, elections and some of the unsavory characters who run for political office, and I'll advocate for maybe one or someone else among the candidates, and people will say, well, the other guy, they may be corrupt, but at least they do good.
Yeah.
Right. So it comes hand in hand. Okay, they do relatively good, but okay, as part of that, we have to accept the fact that they're corrupt. And I've heard that so many times. People say, "Oh yeah, but at least they do good."
So in other words, it's
I
not.
don't want to name.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't want to name names, but I think we all kind of know who these people are. We have someone in mind when we think about that kind of political clan or political family.
Yeah, so it's not so much that it's been normalized, but in fact, the public, in so many ways, they have sort of found a way to try to be involved in the process, for lack of a better word, in terms of, this is no longer just, I mean, corruption obviously is not a one-way street, even in in the most basic kind of structure of it, like you have, contractors, officials, and then the DPWH or some other agencies that are, enforce or implementing these public works. Malino yung kumbaga yung structure na yan. No? But then you see in the public the involvement of the public in not only normalizing corruption, but really just accepting that this is, this is the way of life now. This is how you advance whatever it is that you want to do. This is how you achieve that. So this takes form, for instance, in pupunta ka sa LTO, for instance, before where you just pay pay a fixer a certain amount, and then boom, you have a license. Things like that. Obviously, may pernicious na effect ito. What do you see? What that would be from your vantage point?
Well, I mean, as an advocate for many years of good governance and anti-corruption, it was part of what we needed to do was get the public on our side. And if there is that sort of quiet acceptance that is the norm, then it becomes a little more difficult to get the public riled up enough to get involved. We've seen in our recent history, both you and I are old enough to remember. Of course, the first EDSA revolution, that was kind of when I think the Filipinos had their fill of the fascist government and the corruption that was associated with the current president's father. And again, in 2001, when Estrada was booted out of office. So there are times in our history where we do show where our limit is. But unfortunately, in my opinion, that tolerance, that limit is way too high. We tolerate it too much. And some people attribute it to the Filipino nature of being forgiving and whatnot. I'm no expert on the psychology of the Filipino, but perhaps that plays a certain role in the tolerance that we have for these kinds of things. Certainly, we're not the only ones. I mean, we tend to self-flagellate a lot and say, well, only in the Philippines like this we'll tolerate that. But if it's any comfort, we're not the only ones tolerating these levels of corruption in the world. It's just that you and I happen to live in this country, so it's a particular concern to us.
Yeah, although I would try to push back a little bit on the notion that this is something that, kumbaga, almost cultural na ang yung pagtanggap sa corruption. Because of course, if you talk to the more progressive-minded ones, advocates, or even people from the left, they would say, "Oh, this is pure poverty. This is pure economy. What do you expect of a people that have been languishing for so long in underdevelopment, in lack of livelihood, of lack of economic resources? So they make do. They deal with what's handed them, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that in itself makes all of these problems so gargantuan that I guess solving this is requires almost something revolutionary.
Yeah, no, no, certainly that is true as well, Kaloy. I mean, I am of the thinking of the opinion that a lot of our leaders, so-called leaders, especially the political leaders, want to maintain the status quo in regards to the imbalance of power, in regards to imbalance of wealth, precisely because it allows them to perpetuate, their self-interest and the political system and the system of corruption. So yeah, I would agree with that as well, Kalai. You know, it's I guess poverty is not only poverty of wealth, but also poverty of choice,
Mhm.
poverty of the ability to uh, tackle or think about issues beyond the table, beyond the daily needs. And I think that's the reason why that is part of the reason why there's a large acceptance of what's going on, because people at that level just don't have the luxury of, like you and I and others, to think about these things, to mull over and think about what solutions might be out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense among many here now that where before corruption issues, like for instance during the dictatorship, I mean, it was a very stark. The narrative about or surrounding corruption is quite stark, and then you have this thieving family that stole billions and billions of dollars and stashed it somewhere abroad. I mean, that's kind of the narrative, right, under the Marcoses. But now you have a situation where even how should I put this? An example that I can think of would be, for instance, how local government officials, particularly, have pretty much hijacked social services, for instance,
Yeah,
to use that to their favor during election. But also, I think it makes corruption not only normalized, but it's become a way of life for people, and that these politicians are telling the public that it's okay if you're sick and you don't have anything with you, you don't have any money, you can come to me, and then I
yeah,
can provide you some
yeah,
medicines and send you to a hospital.
yeah,
In return,
yeah,
I expect you to vote for me. I mean,
yeah,
this kind of this I won't call it a phenomena, but this reality has really seeped down to the local,
yeah,
to the most basic
yeah.
units level of our society.
Yeah, I mean, this client patron relationship that local government officials have established with their constituencies does perpetuate the situation, because when you have your constituents who feel they have nowhere to go, they don't have any social services that will backstop them, or that they can rely on, that they have to run to the local politician and extend their palms for any grace that the LGU official might be able to give them. Perpetuates that situation, and I think a lot of local government officials want to perpetuate that situation, and it also shows us how deeply rooted corruption is in our system, especially when we go down to the ground, to that level. And you think, I mean, we did a lot of work previously on money in politics. And the kind of money that is required to run for political office far exceeds the amount that a lot of these officials are being paid. So it begs the question, of course, well, why are they spending tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions
What's
of
the
pesos
ROI?
to become? Yeah, exactly, right. So why are they spending all that money to become a local official, a mayor, or governor, or whatever, or a congressman, when they're definitely not going to get that back in terms of a salary. So it's almost painfully obvious how many of these individuals expect to get a return on their investment, not only just to break even, but of course to make a lot of money. And this is a whole nother issue in terms of trying to address the problem of corruption, Kulay. The money in politics is a huge problem.
Yeah. It reminds me of, just on the point about making money and how they are going to recoup their investments, quote unquote. This whole spectacle that we see, especially in the private. I mean, it's not just a flood control thing in Metro Manila, but if you go down to the countryside, for instance, you take the route from Manila down to Bicol, down to Visayas and to Mindanao, you see, it's almost like you can tell by the quality of the roads if this province, for
Yeah,
instance, is doing well. Uh,
yeah,
and because I and my family, we travel a lot by land down to Mindanao, and for the longest time, that stretch of a highway from Allen in Samar down to Leyte, that's just like the most, I would say, kind of the most difficult highway to
uh, uh,
traverse in the
yeah,
Philippines. And every year that we go there, it's like it doesn't end. The potholes,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the poor
yeah,
quality. I mean, it
yeah,
went on like that for years and years and years. And then
yeah.
if you go down, if you go up north down to go to Sorsogon, the
Yes,
asphalt highway there is
yes,
miraculously, it's like it's another world. So
yeah,
makes you
yeah.
wonder, right?
I mean, you think about Ilocos Norte in the 70s and 80s, right? All the best roads are in Ilocos Norte.
Yeah,
All the best infrastructure is in Ilocos Norte. So yeah, you look at that uneven distribution of, let's say, infrastructure and spending, and you think about, well, who's in power?
yeah,
Who's the Senate president? Who's the Speaker of the House? And then you start making those correlations, right?
yeah.
Um, so as you said, Kaloy, this has been going on for decades. It's not a new phenomenon. It's just every once in a while, nagugulat tayo when we see
Yeah.
something on the news about flood control and the kinds of contractors that are being awarded multiple times over in billions of pesos, and the market capitalization of the organization is less than ₱1 million, and you scratch your head and say, "Ito na naman, di ba? Ito
Yeah.
na naman."
Garapala na lang. Ano? And it's not as if we're not aware of these things. I mean, there's a lot of reporting done
Yeah,
by the media, by groups such as yours before, exposing all
yeah,
of this. I mean, I cannot
yeah,
count
yeah,
now how many times the PCIJ, the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, for instance, has come up with really good reports about public works corruption in the Philippines, and yet
yeah, yeah,
we still see them, every day. And this actually brings me to this issue, which of course, close to your heart in many ways. The issue of checks and balance here. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
how is it doing? I mean, we do
You're
have
speechless, Kaloy.
yeah, we do have structures. We do have agencies of government. We do have certain mechanisms in government that supposedly should be able to check corruption in governance, at least in public works, for instance. Why is it not working as well as it should?
Yeah, in the end, Kaldoy, a lot of our quote unquote institutions, which are not only public institutions of accountability, but even the laws that support them, uh, on paper, they're very strong. So let me pull out a bit. Years ago, you would look at these global sort of institutions measuring corruption in different countries or the institutions, and Philippines would always score high in terms of
Perceptions, yeah,
institutional, yeah, well, also institutional and legal frameworks.
yeah,
We have ombudsman, we have Sandigan Bayan, we have all the laws, all the anti-corruption laws, right? So as regards to that, we would always score high. But then when you look at the implementation, the enforcement, that's where we fail miserably, right? So we have, when we talk about corruption, we have the Office of the Ombudsman, We
Yeah.
have the Sandigan Bayan, which is a court dedicated to hearing corruption cases, right? So they created a separate court system just to listen to corruption cases in government. And we have, of course, the ombudsman, who is supposed to act on behalf of the citizens, right? So they're not there to defend government. If there's a case of corruption against a government official, the ombudsman isn't there to defend government. The ombudsman is there to act as an advocate for the people, to advocate the people's interest. And yet, if I may say, Kaloy, in the history of the ombudsman, of the recent ombudsman post EDSA, there have been 6 ombudsmen from Velasco, Giacerto, Marcelo, Gutierrez, the Lady Justice. I'm not forgetting her name. The Lady Justice Carpio Morales,
yeah.
and then Martires. Of those 6, in my opinion, of those 6, only 2 were really qualified to be ombudsman.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a 33% batting average as far as the ombudsman is concerned. Only 2 of them, in my opinion, actually tried to do their jobs as best they could. The other 4 is very questionable, right? Especially this latest one, Martires. Martires wanted to fight corruption by moral recovery. That was his approach to fighting corruption. It's like, you're not going to do it that way.
Yeah.
So the institutions on paper are there. It's just that we have weak individuals, or not maybe weak individuals who are not really interested in pursuing justice or pursuing the fight against corruption, and that's what we've seen, and that's one big part of the equation. I mean, just going back to your question, why corruption seems to persist in this country in a very spectacular way, is because we don't have the individuals in those positions who really want to do their job justice.
I mean, also not to mention, Vince, the fact that a lot of the many corruption scandals that we've seen over the years involve, not all, but involve, the highest official of the land. I mean,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that makes it doubly, not even doubly, but impossible to really cut the head of corruption in as seamless and clean a manner as
Yeah. So, I mean, just to go back a little to the ombudsman, I in the time of Simeon Marcelo, who was the ombudsman for a short while under President Arroyo, I think it was he. I'm not 100%, but I think it was he who decided that the office of the ombudsman would really just focus on what they call the big fish cases.
Yeah.
To spend their limited energies and resources going after the big fish, right? And not bother with the 32,000 peso misappropriation of funds cases, but really go after the big fish. And he was relatively successful in starting to build up some cases against these so-called big fish. But then, as we will recall, Ombudsman Marcelo had to resign from his post for health reasons. But I know that he was under tremendous pressure from the president at that time to let go of some of these so-called big fish. And I think that pressure on him did actually take a toll on his health. And I think that's why he actually resigned. And of course, he was replaced by Mercy Gutierrez, who, oh my gosh, don't get me started.
Yeah, that was quite a term for during her. So it's so the ombudsman being just one of the institutions, and we're talking about also the Sandigan Bayan, which in itself faces a lot of issues. Reminds me actually of this idea. I forgot who put this forward, but basically saying that in the Philippines, corruption is rewarded by the inaction of this institution. I mean, you have, for instance, the case of the ill-gotten wealth of the Marcoses, including the family of this president, which have not been totally recovered. You had a presidential commission on good governance before. I mean, God bless those who tried to make it work, but in the end, it just didn't. I mean, definitely the problem is intractable. And probably, I mean, I don't want to to sound too pessimistic, but I'm actually going to the point now where I'm asking you your thoughts about, okay, all of these things are happening under President Marcos Jr., which is, the irony here, I hope is not lost to a lot of people. But you
Yeah,
know, this is coming out, these all these issues, and there's all these, discussions right now about corruption happening under him. Can we even kind of deign to imagine that this president, and whose father was the worst thief this country has ever seen, that this president would be any different or would be better? No, I don't want to be so unfair toward President Marcos, but that's just kind of the legacy here, and people expect him to do better. Can we? I mean, is that a rational, a reasonable thing to even think?
I think Kula, you and I are the generation that went through that dictatorship, and I think we do have a certain perception about the son and the family, the whole family, of course, and it is chock full of irony to listen to this current president talk about fighting corruption. But for me, one of the clear, I have my doubts as well as you do, Kaloy, but that being as it may, I'm still at the point where I'm willing to give the current president a bit of benefit of the doubt. And I think, I'm not too sure if you're aware of this, but the term of Ombudsman Martinez just expired last month, and they're in the search for a new ombudsman to replace him. That will be a key appointment by the president, and we can tell. I mean, I will bet all my money that we can determine the future of the fight against corruption based on who he decides will be the ombudsman.
Okay, that's
If
interesting.
it's somebody friendly, if it's somebody close to him, if it's somebody with a less than stellar reputation, then all bets are out in terms of the ombudsman leading the fight. What we will probably see is if we get a less than stellar kind of appointment to the ombudsman, what we will see is perhaps the ombudsman's office being used to go against maybe political enemies or whatever, to eliminate political rivals or whatever. I mean, that might be what we will see. So it's very critical. I don't see much talk about it in the news, but this appointment is going to be very critical in the fight against corruption, and for us to determine whether President Bongbong is serious about fighting corruption or not. Again, giving him the benefit of the doubt. Let's see what he does.
But that's just a thing. How corruption has even kind of. I mean, I don't want to sound as if I'm I'm being unfair here, but the fact that we are now, in a way, in a manner of speaking, pinning our hopes to fight corruption on
Yeah.
the son
Yeah.
of the most corrupt president this country has ever had. I mean, it's not just irony here. I mean, the tragedy here is just, it's so so clear, so palpable in many ways. But going back to the ombudsman, I mean, he's just one person. It's just one
Yeah,
office.
that's true.
I mean, exactly how realistic it would be for this guy, whoever it is. Let's say, Marcos defies all of our fears
Expectations.
and then decides to name somebody, this who will have this Don Quixote like, power or motivation to go after corruption, hammer and tongs. I mean, realistically, though, how much can this guy do to really
Okay, so
finally vanquish this?
that's a very good question, because you're right. It's only one person, right? And that ombudsman still has deputy ombudsman that he or she will rely on. That ombudsman could put together the most airtight case but then it gets thrown to the Sandigan Bayan. So then we have to worry about the integrity of the Sandigan Bayan. So there are many obstacles in the way of this individual to achieving what we would all like to achieve in terms of the fight against corruption. However, that being said, if we do have, again, this is hoping for a lot, but if we do get an ombudsman that is very serious about the job, who does prioritize and sort of focus on fighting corruption, and is charismatic. So you kind of want someone who is also charismatic as well. That person could rally public support for the fight against corruption. I think that's very important. If public support swings behind this new ombudsman because the perception is he or she is doing his or her job well, then that could put pressure on the other institutions. It could then put pressure, for example, on the Sandigan Bayan. If there is public support behind the ombudsman and the ombudsman files a case against a reportedly corrupt individual, then that kind of puts pressure on the Sandigan Bayan to do his job. And we've seen this, time and time again. It's not always successful. You can't always parlay public support for the fight against corruption into success. But it helps. It certainly helps. And then it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier in this conversation about whether or not the public is going to do anything to support, to be vocal or visible about the fight against corruption. But we will also notice, Kaloy, that in recent history, when a spectacular case breaks the news, and you've been a part of the PCIJ in breaking some of this news, about a corrupt official, about the lavish lifestyle of these individuals, people really pay attention. They start following the news.
You think they're not
in the recent case of?
You think they're not yet that too cynical to even, think about changing things within them and within the system, or?
Oh, okay. So, more than 50% of population is probably below the age of 30, right? So they're less jaded than you and I are, perhaps. I would like to hope. In which case, perhaps the younger generation, idealistic as they usually are, might be less cynical and more open to showing support for fight against corruption and all of that. So that's what I'm hoping.
Just a tangential point here, Vince, but I've heard anecdotes about young professionals, millennials, and Gen Z saying, "Oh, corruption, misgovernance is so bad in this country that I'm just going to school now, getting my education so that I can fly the hell out of this country and probably move to some country in Europe and do my bit as a digital nomad or something." It's
that's true.
It's a cynicism, I think, that regardless of our optimism that things may turn out better, but that sort of cynicism, I think, is pervasive, and we can't blame people, obviously. But that's a challenge here now, I think, Vince. I hope you agree with me. Having fought corruption, having advocated for good governance for years and years now, you've been in communities, you've talked to stakeholders and all of that. It's, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it almost feels like it's impossibly difficult to get buy-in from the ordinary Filipino about these things.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so my own experience in trying to get public support for the fight against corruption, on specific issues, perhaps even, it is difficult. It is difficult, but at the same time, I have had the privilege of meeting individuals in civil society outside the public sphere who are deep in the fight, and that gives people like me a lot of hope to see these individuals. Now, they're not as numerous as I would like, as we would like, but they are out there, and that does give me hope. And there, a lot of them are among the young people as well. And
Yeah.
young people wanting to leave the country and look for greener pastures. That's not a phenomenon just of the millennials of Gen Z, but that was true even in my generation, in our generation, right? There are a lot of people we know who found greener pastures abroad. But I guess nowadays it's much easier, as you say. The lifestyle of a digital nomad is a new phenomenon that we didn't have in our time. So it's much easier now. But there are a lot of young individuals I see in the news that I've met that are here
Yeah.
fighting, who are willing to take over the reins, if you will, of the fight that you and I and others have been in.
Yeah.
So there is some hope. Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of hope, Vince, I mean, let's talk a little bit in our final stretch of this conversation about civil society here. I mean, good governance advocates such as yourself, civil society in general. And when we talk about civil society, these are groups or individuals that are, trying to change things for the good in this country, not just on, not just to stop corruption, but on the wider issue of good governance. What's your what's your sense about where civil society is going to be in terms of fighting corruption?
Well, we I think the Democratic voices were, I wouldn't say we're stunted, but I think the Democrat, of course, we know that the Democratic space was limited in the time of the
Duterte.
previous president.
Yeah.
Yeah, Duterte, because of his attacks against media, against activists, etc. And uh, oddly enough, oddly enough, under Bongbong, we seem to have moved a little bit out of that. There's quite a bit more feeling, I think, and you know better than I. There's a better feeling nowadays that maybe we can speak our minds now more freely without really having to worry about a bullet in our head or whatever. Odd. I mean, I find myself in an odd situation saying that about the current administration, but I mean, that seems to be the case, and
Yeah.
so that allows, I think, for more voices to join the conversation. The democratic space is nothing to belittle. When you have that space to have these kinds of discussions and conversations in a relatively free manner, that helps a lot. And I think we have moved out from the darkness of the Duterte administration to the not so darkness
Yeah. Yeah.
of the Bongbong administration. Although what I have seen since he became president is less of that. I don't. Again, you're probably better to speak on this issue than I am about journalistic freedoms and all of that. And it's a lot. The threats to journalism and media are a lot less now. The threats are not so much coming from government as they are from external forces such as social media and the dawn of generative AI and all of that. That's really, Kala, you and I have been together in Media Nation, so we've talked a lot about these issues. So the threats are not so much anymore from our own government, but they are from global trends and global things that are happening, especially with regards to these things, social media and generative AI.
That's true. The civic space under Marcos definitely, I mean, to this government's credit, has widened. Not fully yet, but it's widened a bit compared to the previous one. But also, I think one way to make corruption kind of to mainstream the conversation surrounding corruption is really, I think it's high time that civil society groups, the media, and even the human rights movement need to tackle corruption as a human rights issue.
Yeah, yeah,
It is a human rights issue under international
yeah,
human rights law, except that
correct.
the narrative in the Philippines has been so kind of tawag dito, masyadong narrow, that
Yes,
hardly anybody talks about the human rights impact of corruption. I mean, we
yeah,
can. talk for hours here about how the human rights of an ordinary family in a slum community in Metro Manila are affected by the actions of their local government, right? But hardly
Yeah.
anything is being said about that. So I think if we expand the discourse of human rights, not just on civil political rights, but to include economic and social rights as a whole, which includes, the issues of corruption, issues of good governance, I think we will be better suited to fight this problem. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think if you expand the notion of fighting corruption as a human rights issue, as you noted, Kaloy, human rights has traditionally been very narrowly defined by many people. But if we were to expand the definition of human rights to include the fight against corruption, against the human right to have good government, for example, the human right to have basic education and social services, then we can expand the conversation,
Yeah.
right? To include these things. And unfortunately, I think the expectation of a lot of people about what they can expect from their government or what they can demand from their government, in terms especially of social services, in terms of good governance, in terms of how money is spent, how tax money is spent, hasn't been as prominent as it should be. And I think more and more people should, I guess it's our job as advocates
Yeah.
to make that connection more clear,
Yeah.
right? That the reason you don't have food on your plate, the reason that your vegetables are so expensive, the reason that you don't have 20 peso per kilogram rice is precisely because of the people that are in power. And again, it's a bit of a vicious circle, because then you can't blame these people because come election time, you get 15,000. I mean, I heard the going rate during the last
Oh,
national
it's
election,
increasing.
not the recent one. Yeah, I mean, it was like, well, during the last national elections, when 2022, it had reached like 15,000 per voter,
That's crazy.
and it's hard. I mean, it's hard to turn that down,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
No.
if you're a subsistence family, you're living hand to mouth, 15,000 is a lot. So
I mean, whole communities, whole families, like
yes,
they arrange their like schedules around elections in terms of when they're
yeah,
getting money, when they're getting new phones or things like that. It's crazy. Um,
yeah, it is crazy.
but really, I think we don't even have to look far in terms of kind of drawing a direct line between a human rights violation, poverty, and corruption. I mean, just look at the drug
Yeah,
war, for
yeah,
instance. A
yeah,
huge
yeah,
majority of the victims of the drug war are poor people who
yeah,
live in communities mostly run by corrupt politicians.
yeah,
And the reason they're poor
yeah,
is not so much that we don't have, the resources to make their livelihood better, but really just because you have politicians, local politicians who choose to pocket these things, and
yeah,
so there is a connection, there is a direct line, and I think it's the job of civil society, media, advocates to really make that clear and really just to change the discourse. Vince, it's been great talking to you about this, and you may have some thoughts that you want to add to this before I wrap this up.
Well, okay. Look, you and I this morning have seemed to outline a very pessimistic scenario. But I think for me, I'm naturally an optimist. So I wouldn't have been in the field I was in if I wasn't an optimist, and I still am. And it's about each and every one of us doing our part. I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to go out to the street and protest and rally. It can be just very simple things, just resisting at the street level, corruption and all that. Just doing little things. When people ask me, well, what can I do? How can I join the fight in corruption against corruption? It's like they're thinking big things, right? But people aren't willing to do big things because they have daily lives to worry about,
Yeah,
right? So my thing is, don't worry about the big thing. Just do the small things, right? Just resist it in your sphere.
yeah.
if there's an opportunity to take one path or the other, take the path that is perhaps a little harder, but perhaps what we might call a correct path, right? So if you get a ticket, I mean, I got my driver's license in 1983, and I made a promise to myself that no matter how many times I get stopped by a cop, I'm not going to bribe him, right, or her.
Yeah.
And I've been stopped, I don't know, a dozen times over the course of my driving career, and I have not once extended a bribe. I've had to pay about 2 or 3 tickets, but the other tickets I've just sort of talked my way out of and convinced the guy that he was wrong or whatever, right? But it's just that. It's just the daily interactions we have and opportunities, right? Just do that. If 120 million Filipinos, or not even 100% of us, even if 50% of us, 60 million Filipinos do that on a daily basis, well, right?
Yeah. Well, I would not want to douse on that optimism, Vince. But yeah, I agree completely. I mean, it's the small things, it's the little things, it's the things that you probably wouldn't consider significant enough to make a difference, but it does.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, it does.
Yeah.
Vince Lazatin, thank you so much for indulging us this morning. It's really been great talking to you, and I can only hope that one, we see each other in person again, but also that the advocacy, our shared advocacy for good governance, bears some fruit. Vince Lazatin, good governance advocate. Thank you, and thank you so much, guys, for watching, for listening, and see you till the next episode. This is Kaloy Conde again. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaloy.